from the textbook sort of definition, sustainability is defined as meeting the needs of the present without compromising the needs of future generations to meet their own needs. Which is actually kind of hard to remember. There's a lot of needs being mentioned there, right? So for me, this basically means that our human species can continue to survive and thrive, and that's got to be the end goal. Now, if you're wondering what survive and thrive means, well, I believe that's been described in the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Looking at how, the 17 goals and 169 targets and 291 indicators, you can kind of guess that this term sustainability is actually very vague. So that's why people actually put in the effort to try and define it. What does it even mean? And the SDGs actually try and describe it for us. Now, they actually, before the SDGs and Agenda 2030 actually came into play, and that was in 2015, 2016, 2015, 2016, ESG was kind of the way that corporations used to come up with these expectations of what is it to be responsible. Responsible in the sense that they are a responsible part of society, that despite they're doing business, that they're actually good for society and economy, and now even environment. So there are actually parallels between ESG as well as the SDGs, right? There are only two differences. One is that in the SDGs, they've actually included peace and partnership as areas that need to be focused on. And with last year's, war on Ukraine, the conflict we're seeing in Israel and Palestine, that's reversed more than 20 years of development achievements in an instant. It's no wonder that the SDGs would put peace and partnership as very important aspects of sustainability that need to be worked on. Okay. At the same time, in the ESG framework, what is actually not really talked about explicitly in the 5 SDG subcategories is the G component, which is something that you were talking about. And why G component is such an important thing is that, number one, people need to know whether the claims that this company or this organization has made in the E and S realm, or even the silent E, the economy profits part of it, is trustable. Okay, that's why the G component is there. We want to know that it's trustable when they're making those claims. And when they're saying they're responsible, we can actually believe it, okay, to a certain extent. And number two, the G component is also very important because when a person who has driven the ESG agenda in a company leaves, we want to make sure that this company is not going to just suddenly switch. Okay, charismatic character has gone. Now we're going to change everything that the company stands for and does. Right. So G allows a structure to be in place so that there's continuity as an organization and not just dependent on a personality. Okay, right. Now, climate actions seems to have gotten a lot more attention, almost seems separate from the initiative of sustainability, right? That everyone say, oh, we're doing net zero, we're doing, climate stuff. And it seems separate, but it's actually not separate. Very often people actually think even conservation is separate from climate stuff, but it's not the case because studies actually show that, if we don't actually, achieve these other parts of like conservation, for example, it actually interacts with the climate system to make sure that we stay in this narrow range that's not too hot and not too cold. And the less diversity we have in the world, it actually creates more variability in terms of our temperatures, in terms of the water that moves around the world and therefore makes water available. And there's also changes as a result in health and diseases. So why climate action seems to be like this separate thing is because when people have realized this climate system within the operating system, it's like your phone's operating system. If the operating system doesn't work, then no matter what type of apps you put on top of it, it's still not going to really function. Okay. So if this is already blowing your mind, then just remember this. Sustainability is the end goal, which all three of you actually identified, but it is a very vague concept and people need to find a way to describe it in order to do something about it, right? So the SDGs and the ESG pillars are a way to help people get their head around this vagueness. And climate action is just one of the umbrella tips that contribute to sustainability. Imagine actually the umbrella has 17 different tips, and climate action is just one of that tip. But it has more weightage. It tips the umbrella a bit more to the side because people realize that it can actually break the whole umbrella if this operating system doesn't actually work. And it's going to break soon. We only have about 6 to 7 years more before we close the door onto locking in these really bad climate operating system. Okay. So if you look at all of this at this point, it's still very aspiration heavy, as in like, this is what needs to be done to be sustainable. But what is missing is how this can be done. And to be fair, the SDGs actually try to address this in the description of their targets and the indicators. But it does run the risk of being very prescriptive, right? Prescriptive, like saying, okay, this can be done, this cannot be done, this is sustainable, that is not sustainable. That's very prescriptive. And when it's very prescriptive, what it does is that it basically excludes out certain ideas or innovations that could perhaps actually solve the problem. So what we need is that something is liquid enough to allow that creativity and the ingenuity of different solutions to come together and develop. But it still needs to be consistent enough to be a guiding compass. And therefore, the circular economy comes in as a very important sort of guide, as a compass, as a pathway of how. Okay. And are there other pathways? Of course, there are other pathways. There's the renewable energy pathway, electrification, digitalization, smart, everything. But these are very vertical focused and therefore unable to deal with the impacts beyond their verticals. This is why circular economy as a pathway comes in to talk about how.